I'm Randall Hardy, and today is Tuesday, the 18th of February. This is an update to give you some idea of what's happening now with the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill that recently completed its committee stage. I'll also provide you a musical interlude as we go along and to inspire you to get involved in making our message known. And also, I want to give you a few thoughts on legal opinions and judicial reviews. There's been a bit of confusion recently, so I just want to explain a bit of what the process is. So why do I want to start? Well, I've created a calendar of what might happen over the coming weeks, really 3 or 4 months. So let me put it up and I'll talk you through it. Most of you will know that the committee stage in the House of Commons was completed on Tuesday last week, just a week ago. It came to an end. It was subject to a programme motion. It got through the task very, very quickly, most unsatisfactorily, but that is what a government can do. There's nothing happening this week in Parliament because they're still stuck in the school system and they're on half term, basically. It's called the February break, but it's all to coincide with half term. They come back next week and we're expecting the report stage to happen fairly soon. From now on, I'm working on the expectation that they will want to get this through very quickly, which means the report stage and third reading will all happen on one day, the same day, either this coming week starting Monday the 24th or the following week, the 3rd of March. Now, if that doesn't happen, everything else I'm going to tell you from here will all happen that bit later. So from here on in, we're working on guesswork, but once it gets into the report stage, we'll have a bit more idea of the time. So we're on half term. If you look at the calendar, I've got a big black arrow there. That is the week this has been recorded in. So I can also add that at the moment, there is no fixed date for the report stage to happen. On the order paper for Monday the 24th, in future business, item 24 is the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill remaining stages. And they'll be looking at what's at the bill as it was amended in the bill committee. The amended bill is the report produced by the committee. That is all they'll be working to. The phrase remaining stages means both report stage and third reading. Normally, they have a longer debate on report stage and then a short debate, about an hour, on the third reading afterwards. Now, on guesswork, we're looking at that happening either next week or the week after. The first thing that will happen once those stages, by the way, it is going to go through. The Labour government has got such a large number of people supporting it. It will not be voted down at report stage. There might be some amendments made, or there might not be. So the ones that are bound to get through are the ones from the government. The other ones which might get adopted are really good ones from other parties, but that's unlikely. So where are we going? We're going to be having the report stage, as I said, and third reading, probably in the next 2 weeks. So that is by the 6th, Thursday, the 6th of March. As you look at my calendar, you'll see I've not given any business on the Fridays. They are days set aside for private members' bills in both houses. So what we're looking at is something happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday in any week. So we get when it happens, it will be a one-day event unless something is really wrong and they get forced to go into more dates. But let's not think that'll happen. And it will be receive a third reading. That means it's printed again with any amendments and immediately sent into the House of Lords. By immediately, I mean the next working day. So if the report stage is on, say, Tuesday, the 4th of March, it will get its first reading in the House of Lords on the 5th of March. In both houses, the first reading is always just a procedural thing. It's over and done with before you realise that it's happened. So the first reading will happen. Don't panic about that. It just means that around 2 weeks after that date, if the government can find time in the Lord, they will timetable the Lord's second reading. So that moves us into March on the calendar. And here I've penciled in the 2 weeks starting Monday the 10th, ending Thursday the 20th as the potential dates for the Lord's second reading. That is a one-day debate. Some peers might move amendments, but that will not be because they expect to get them through. It will be to get a response out of the minister. And in this case, it's Baroness Smith, I think of Malvern, who is the minister who will be answering the questions in the Lords. And that will give us a bit more insight into what the government's thinking is. One day's debate, some amendments, most of them withdrawn unless the government's happy with, wants them to go in. And then that will set up the committee stage. Now, normally, unlike the Commons, the committee stage is not a small committee. It is a committee of the whole House. Any peer can speak during those debates. There's protocol that they really ought to be turning up to other stages of the bill along the way. They should be there at the second reading. They don't have to be, but that's the protocol. And the committee stage should last a minimum of 8 full-day debates. By full day, I mean from sometime in the afternoon till about 10 o'clock at night. That is a full-day debate in the Lords. Now, if they get a lot of amendments to any bill, and those amendments can't be grouped together, now you know in the Commons Committee, they didn't discuss every amendment, but they grouped them together. That happens here. If amendments are similar, they take them all at the same time. And in committee stage, if they get a lot of amendments and they can't be grouped together, they have to allocate each of those amendments a debate time, and that can take around about an hour. So if they get a lot of amendments, and there may be some over the clauses we're interested in. Now, that used to be clause 24 to 29 and 30 to 37. Because there's a new clause in the bill at number 9, we're now interested in 25 to 31 and 32 to 38. And not to forget the single unique identifier, which is and was and still is clause 4. So here we are, starting about 2 weeks after the first reading. The second reading, we will get the committee stage. That's a minimum of 8 days, and I'm projecting, assuming when it next appears in the Commons is roughly right, that will happen either the last full week in March or the 3 days, 31st of April, of March and 1st and 2nd of April. But then there'll be a pause because Easter recess in the Lords, they shut down on Wednesday the 2nd, and they come back on Wednesday the 23rd. So they've nearly 2 weeks off. And the report stage will start either just before or just after Easter, the Easter break. Of course, the later it starts, the later it will finish. Finishing is a bit of a trouble because it depends on how many amendments are in and how much peers want to debate other clauses. The big media item, certainly in the teaching profession, hasn't been home education, children not in school registers, independent educational institutions. It's been what's happening with academies. And I can expect that peers will want a lot of debating time on them. So either we will get the clauses we're concerned with rushed through, or if Lords come up with many amendments, then to those, they may take a bit longer. And that's why when we come down to May, you will see that on my calendar, I have faded out the end of the committee stage. It's really difficult to say. If they can't get it in 8 days, it can go to 9, 10, 11, 12. I've heard that some bills are even getting 15 or more days allocated to them. And that is frustrating for a government that's in a rush. So, oh yes, there's in May, of course, 5th of May is a bank holiday. So is the 20, sorry, not the 29th, the 26th. I haven't put it on there because everything's fading out. But shall we say that these things will just keep going on? And we don't know when it will finish, but what follows the committee stage is important just for me to explain briefly. It will be followed about 2 weeks later by the report stage. Report stage, just as it is in the Commons, is normally 1, perhaps 2 days, depending how much, again, how many amendments there are and things like that. The report stage, there is a fixed term here. It is 2 weekends. It's so therefore about 2 weeks minimum, again, depending on other business. The third reading cannot happen straight afterwards, as far as I understand it in the Lords. Normally, there's got to be at least 3 days between the report stage and the third reading. That means that, on my estimation, if it passes through without too much trouble, without too many delays, we can expect it to complete its progress through the Lords either sometime mid to late May or early June, at which point I'm sure there'll be some amendments made. It will have to go back to the Commons for another debate, whether or not to accept the Lords' amendments. If they don't, it goes back to the Lords. They decide whether they want to press them and so on. And this process is called ping pong. The government can cut it short. They can just say, we will override the Lords and we will make our amendments in the common stick. They have got the precedent. But whenever it is, that is when it will receive royal assent. It might be in July. I think the government definitely want it to be through before the summer recessed. And they're working hard at that. So that's to bear in mind. Once it receives royal assent, I've said elsewhere that the bill actually states which parts will come into effect immediately on it receiving royal assent, which parts will come within a short period of time, and then everything else, including the children not in school registers and the independent educational institution sections, will have to wait until the department has created secondary legislation, or what we call guidance. It will have to consult on that, and then they will have to process the consultations. Now, they're not waiting for us to say to them, don't do it. They know we don't want them to do it, but they're pig-headed and they're pressing ahead. So what we need to do is yeah, engage in that consultation, but think at that stage how else we are going to push back on that. Just one thing about the Lords before I leave it behind. Several of us are trying to draw up a list of the Lords that support us, the Lords who have been very much pro-registers and arguing for it for a time, and those who have spoken about them but could be persuaded. And then the majority of Lords are people who have not said much about it. Now, we do need to talk to all those, but let me tell you, here's my proto list. It's not a final one, but this is the type of list I think we might be able to work on. Just to remind you all that the peer who started all this off in 2017, Lord Soley, even though during the passage of the 2022 Schools Bill said he would not retire until these proposals were on the statute book, has retired. So there's no point in writing to Lord Soley, Clive Soley, Labour peer. There's no point writing to him. He is already retired. But what I'm going to suggest you do, and I'm working on a list myself, is have a look at the Schools Bill debates in the Lords. It never reached the Commons, and look at those people who spoke against, in favour of registers, strongly in favour, those who spoke against, and those who had some doubts about them. Now, here's my quick suggestion. Baroness Barron was the minister in charge of the Schools Bill, pressing for registers. She is now the education spokesman for the Conservatives, the official opposition in the Lord. She is very pro-registers, as is Lord Story, Liberal Democrat spokesman, Lord Watson of Invergowrie, another Labour peer, Baroness Gohir, I can't remember where she's from, and Baroness Chapman of Darlington, all seem to be speaking in favour. I'm hoping to get a fuller list soon, but that's where we're at on those. Some peers who were a bit in the middle. Oh, no, two more. Let me remind you. Lord Agnew and Baroness Beresford are both ex-Conservative ministers. They both are in favour of registers, as is Lord Baker, also an ex-education minister. I don't know if Lord Baker has retired now. I doubt it, but we'll find out soon during these because he will be speaking about it. So those are the people from memory I know spoke against the bill. In the middle ground, the Lord Bishop of Hereford, if he's still in the House, Baroness Mackintosh of Hudnall, Labour, Baroness Garden of Frognall, Liberal Democrat, and Lord Knight of Weymouth, sounded to me like they're open to persuasion. These are people who we could do. And then I'm going to ask you not to contact these people. They are already on board. They are supportive of home education or civil liberties and see home education as a subset of that. Many of you will remember Lord Way's speeches, a home educating father. Lord Lucas has been a long-time friend of home educators. The two Green Party peers, Baroness Jones and Baroness Bennett, have got family or know people who home educate. They are very much in support of our cause. Baroness Fox of Buckley is non-affiliated. She's a free speech and civil liberties champion. I think she'll be on board. Don't pester her. And Lord Acking was a latecomer to the debate because he'd spoken to home educating families. And I'm fairly sure he will be doing this time. So here, working back through them, Lord Way, Lord Lucas, Lord Baroness Jones, Baroness Bennett, Baroness Fox, and Lord Hacking, please don't pester them. They're busy people. They don't need further contacts. Several of them are already in touch with home educators, and they'll be feeding them good information. That middle group, the Bishop of Hereford, Baroness Mackintosh, Baroness Garden, Lord Knight of Weymouth, and there may be others, do write to them, thank them for their support in the past, ask them if they would think again, perhaps tell them your family's situation, and so on. They could be good people to contact. The first group I mentioned, Baroness Barron, Lord Story, Lord Watson, Baroness Gohere, Baroness Chapman, Lord Baker, Lord Agnew, and Baroness Berridge. Now, you could write to, especially if you've got a situation where home education saved your family. You know the type of story, not just a rant, but actually something that pulls at your heart. If you've got stories like that, write to these peers in that way and ask them how registers would have helped your children, would have helped your family. That's the type of thing I think we're moving towards. You don't need to do it this week, you don't need to do it next week, but you might want to start preparing your letters. Again, quick rules for writing to peers. They do not have staff like MPs. They don't have a contract with you. So you need to work at building a relationship. Perhaps if they're in the middle group or they're peers we don't know about, you could start by just introducing yourself, a short email that says, this is me. I've got a story I'd like to share with you. I'd like to ask for your support in resisting these clauses of the bill. Please, can I send you some more information? That would be a good way to start. And then do it that way. I would say, please do not send them reams of paperwork and do not send them pro forma letters with your name and little bits of other details. They'll spot it. They don't need to use AI. If you're reaching out to them as people, how might you do that? Well, I've had two thoughts. A lot of these peers have got ordinary surnames, right? Baroness Smith, the government minister. Now, if you're called Smith or whatever, if you find a peer with your surname, you could appeal to them as perhaps a distant family member. They might not be, but you know what I mean. A lot of them have where they want to be associated with. Baron Smith of Malvern. She's obviously from the area of the Malverns. And most peers, Lord Knight of Weymouth, he's got connections there. So if you can find a peer who lives near you, you might be really good. And the further you're from London, the harder it will be, by the way. But you know what I mean? They have connections. Be really good to say to them, look, there's a group of us who are home educators in this area where you're associated with. Would you like to meet us sometime? But going back to the surname as well, even if you can't find anybody with your surname, can I suggest a simple rule for deciding which lords to write to? Start with those whose initials, a surname has the same initial as yours. So in my case, I might write to Lord Hacking, but I know I'm not going to do, but he's got a H and I've got a H. Something like that. That's the type of thing. We don't want to flood these peers, and people will be saying more about the best way to do it. But the one thing not to do is send them reams of pages sent by somebody else. They probably won't read it. The two green peers have got one secretary between them. So they have to read everything and pass it on that's relevant. And they can't read everything if you flood them with things. Remember, it was a good idea. We needed to flood the committee stage with responses, so they got a sense of the feeling. But that will not work with individual peers. We need to appeal to them as human beings. So let's take a break there. I hope that's been helpful with what's happening with the bill. Now I want to go and let you listen to a song. Some of you will have seen it on Facebook or Instagram or other places already. If you've not seen it before, I think you'll find it really moving. And what I'd like you to do is share it with people. Share it with as many people as you can who may not have seen it. Family, friends, your local councillor, and others. It's by Kathryn Walford, who's a home educating mum. She tells you in the song about her family.
Let me introduce you to the minions in my world. Philip is my boy and Lily is my girl. Both of them have autism and both ADHD. Lily got the bonus of severe anxiety. My son had too much time off school due to PFAPA, when his fevers and his seizures would often ruin his day. They said they'd get social involved because of his attendance rate, and they kept him in all afternoon with a temp of 41.8. 'Cause to them it didn't matter about his physical health needs, as long as they could tick the box that his bum was in the seat. And though he wasn't learning, at least it showed that he was there. They didn't inform me of his fever 'cause they really didn't care. He had some really bad seizures that night. The story of my daughter and her time in both her schools would break your heart to hear, because it was so cruel. She came away with no self-worth, a burden by design. Lily was self-harming. She was only 9. To school it didn't matter, it's just something all kids do. It's just done for attention, and if you believe it, you're a fool. And when I tried to point out they weren't meeting my child's needs, they shifted and they twisted and they put the blame on me. I got both of my kids out and now we home educate. I'm invested in their future, they're both doing pretty great. But the government wants to change things in some pretty scary ways, and it saddens me they want to take our right to this away. It's already been proven that school doesn't work for us. I finally got my children safe and Gov wants to stuff it up. Instead of fixing broken services, they'd rather shift the blame, using home education as their scapegoat once again. I'm maybe just one person, but this story isn't new. I've met so many families who have all been through this too. And I'm not just singing for my rights, but for those that need them next, and for the thousands of children drowning 'cause their needs aren't being met.
In this final segment, I just want to say a few words about legal opinions and what might follow from them. There's at least 2 groups we know of either have obtained or are looking for legal opinions, and that's not a problem. I would tend to say the more legal opinions, the better. It is no problem having multiple legal opinions, because actually nobody can afford to ask a barrister to cover everything that we might want them to. Here's a bit of an explanation. With barristers, you pay for what you get. The more questions you ask, the more it costs you, but the more answers you get. What does it cost to get a legal opinion? Well, I would say a good one if it's on a limited number of questions, could be up to £5,000–6,000. Now, it is possible to reduce the cost if you can get somebody who qualifies for legal aid. You might be able to share a legal opinion with them, and that would reduce the cost because they will get legal aid on their part. And that's possible to do in different mixtures. You can have two individuals, you can have an organisation and an individual. That just helps reduce the cost. I know somebody who made inquiries about a legal opinion about this bill, and they were quoted between £15,000 and £20,000. That is a lot of money. But the more you pay, the more you get. So, but what happens once you've got one? Well, at this stage, it's not a court proceeding. It is something to wave in front of the government and say, we think you're getting this wrong. We think what you're doing is illegal. You read this and think about it. And they will go and think about it. And quite often, you might pick up something and they might just adjust it. They don't change what's really happening. So in this case, they might change some of the data we have to give on the registers, but they will not change the overall problem, which is registration, monitoring, and assessment. But they may just fine-tune one or two bits to avoid it. Or somebody might come along with a legal opinion that really stops them in their tracks. And they think, we can't do that. A recent example from a couple of years ago, they were thinking of trying to bring in some changes to deregistration and so on. And a group of people crowdfunded a legal opinion. And when the new guidance was published, because it wasn't primary legislation, it was secondary legislation, the offending clause had been left out. Now, it didn't mean they'd given up on doing it, it just meant they had to go away and think of a different way to do it. So that is what at this stage. It may be that a lord sees the legal opinion and stands up and waves it in front of the minister and says, you need to read this. It may be that a party publishes it on their website and then writes to the minister, or does it the other way around, writes to the minister, we've got this legal opinion. It says this. What are you going to do about it? So it can happen in all types of ways. And it really doesn't matter how many legal opinions there are at this stage. Not everybody will be asking the same questions. And that's good. There may be other people getting legal opinions on other parts of the bill. We don't know. We just have to see. But the more legal opinions at this stage, the better. The thing changes when we come to the implementation. Now, once it's become law, it gets technical, but to try and keep it in simple for this stage, this is a fair way off yet, it might be 2 years off. When they've issued the guidance, one question which could be answered fairly immediate, is this guidance in accordance with other legislation, like human rights, data protection, and things like that? Personally, I thought that the 2019 guidance crossed some of those red lines, but so far it's not been tested at law. Something like that might happen. But this time we do need, if it gets to that stage and there's a judicial review, we do need those things to be part of the case that's put forward. But how will that happen? Well, let me say it's not the first people to get a legal opinion that should be the ones who take it forward into judicial review. As I say, they might need another legal opinion about the guidance by then. But what does matter is the grounds on which the case is taken forward, and that needs to be comprehensive. Now, very briefly, the first thing that happens in a case like this, you usually aren't taking the government, because they write guidance in a way that is clearly confusing. What do I mean by that? It says you could do this. Doesn't mean you should, but you might consider doing this, and things like that. So that is all the types of things that happen in this process. People need to say, well, guidance has to tell you to do the wrong thing, not that guidance suggests in certain circumstances you might do this. That might be true in 1 out of 1,000 cases, but in 999 it's not. So guidance is hard, but it's the application of guidance that is important. Now, you may say in that circumstances, well, this local authority, for example, is behaving badly because the guidance isn't clear enough. And that might cause them to have to go back and write the guidance. Or, as it did with the Scottish Named Person scheme, legislation was in place, they had to withdraw it. And that might be the case if this case gets to a judicial review, if this bill and the actions from it. But there's something else here. It's not always the body that starts the judicial review that is able to contribute to it. And there's a really significant case, if you're interested in free speech, that was concluded only last week on the 12th of February. It concerned a lady called Kirsty Higgs, who'd been sacked 6 years previously by a school because she said something about her personal views on sexuality on Facebook, and they decided they could sack her because they didn't like what she said. Now, her cause was taken up by Christian Concern, and they headlined their report on the judgment that she won a Court of Windsor's, the Court of Appeal rules dismissal for free speech is illegal. Now, that is an important headline, but they didn't report everything, because the same day, I think it was, the same day, the Free Speech Union tells you on the can what it's about. It's about protecting free speech. Also reported it as a landmark moment for workplace free speech. But as you read down the article, and I'll put the links for everything into the text below the video, they tell you, they say this: the Free Speech Union intervened in the case and successfully persuaded the Court of Appeal to adopt several key arguments, reinforcing vital protections for the freedom of belief in the workplace. Now, what happened here? They looked at Christian Concern's case and said, there's some things missing from this case. We want these to be discussed, considered by the court at the same time. And so they applied to the court for permission to intervene in this case. Rather, that is more cost effective than letting that case go by and then them having to find another case and take it later. So they intervened, and this is a perfect standard way. That's what the Department for Education did with the Portsmouth Judicial Review. They intervened. It's normal. And by the way, in that case, they advertised in the current guidance to the 2019 guidance, they would do so. So we weren't surprised when they did. But in this case, I'm speaking about the Free Speech Union says it did intervene. And what's more, it made arguments that Christian Concern had not made. They later in the article say, our intervention played a crucial role in shaping the court's approach to central legal questions, ensuring the principles underpinning freedom of belief and expression were rigorously examined. So they felt that the Christians' concern case was not strong enough, and they came in. So it's the person with the strongest case, or the body with the strongest case, that need to be involved in the judicial review. Now, if somebody else gets there before them, well, there's always the option of intervening. I'm not quite sure if the original complainant can object. I think they might be able to do, but the judge will decide whether that's a good enough reason or not. But the first one will set grounds which can be looked at. And if those grounds aren't broad enough, that's important. So one final thing about this before I close. When a judicial review is taken forward, the first thing that has to be done by the complainant is write to the body concerned saying, I think you are treating me unjustly, and these are the grounds on which I think that is happening. If you do not pay attention to this, I will take you to court. Now, under normal circumstances, that letter then sets out the grounds which will follow it all the way through the case. It is possible to adjust, but that's at judge's discretion. And that is a document that there's no need to keep secret. It can be available. It's already available to the defence. And I would say a good rule of thumb, if anybody is wanting to crowdfund for a legal opinion, they must share what grounds have been set forth in that letter. So if we get to that stage, I will say to you, that's what I'll be looking for. I'll be looking for whoever's wanted to crowdfund, and that's different from taking something forward privately. In the case I've been talking about, neither the Christian Concern nor the Free Speech Union crowdfunded for their money. They just got on and did it. But if people are crowdfunding, I would say they need to be very open, upfront with the people they're asking money from, because if they're not, what are they hiding? Well, I don't know. But in this case, I'm saying if there is a judicial review of the guidance of the practice of local authorities after the guidance is published, we will need to know, and we're being asked to contribute to it, the home educating communities will need disclosure of what the grounds are. So that's where we're at. We can have as many legal opinions as we want at this stage. The more the merrier. When it comes 2 or 3 years down the road, we will need a focused attack on it through the courts if we haven't pushed it over by then. I hope you found this video helpful. Please check the links which I'll put below it and on my own website. Thank you.